first of all, I guess I should say welcome to our DNN Technology Group meeting. Thank you for attending. I'm just kind of officiating the meetings here in Sean's absence. Obviously, we can talk about anything you guys want to talk about today, but just a couple items that we're going to review or look at is first, Andrew's got the DNN vNext POC, which we've been talking a lot about in the Slack channel, which is all about getting to .NET Core, which is the main task that Andy has tasked this group with. And then Daniel Metler, who's also on the meeting, is going to give a brief demo at the end of Koi, which is hoping to get harmony across CSS frameworks, which that's what the website says. So we'll let Daniel do that, and then we'll give feedback. So that's really all I know here for the agenda. I think Andrew's segment probably will take up the most time. So Andrew, I will shut up and turn it over to you. You should be able to see a share screen button somewhere within your Zoom meeting.
All right, share screen. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right, before we get started, Clint, do I have a time frame I need to try and keep this under?
Well, not really. I mean, I think everybody will stay here as long as they can. We scheduled a meeting for 1 hour, and Daniel has requested like maybe 10 minutes. So
okay, cool. I wasn't sure if he needed like 30 or something. I'm going to try to keep it between 30 and 40 minutes so we can at least discuss stuff. All right, so now to piggyback off what Clint was saying, we got tasked with putting together a vNext solution in .NET Core. So a couple weeks ago, I started talking with a few other members of this group and said, let's just try it. Let's see what we can do in .NET Core and see how things come together. Next slide. So the path that we decided to take with this is using Razor pages. So some of you have talked to me at DNN Summit recently, talked to me the last week during this meeting, and I was mentioning that implementing Razor pages in DNN platform could be an idea to get developers from web forms over to a .NET Core solution, because the biggest problem that we have is, do we want to make a hard break or do we want to make some type of transition path? And then there are a couple slides that I'm going to go over that in a little bit more detail, and then we're going to do a demo and show you some repositories and answer all of your really good questions I'm sure everyone's going to have. So right now, DNN is built on .NET Framework using an older technology of web forms. Moving forward, .NET Core doesn't support web forms, and that's where the big problem of how are we going to migrate users over. A lot of stuff kind of repeats stuff that we talked about with .NET Core being the future. It'll help us be relevant in the .NET community and all that good stuff. One other thing I wanted to mention is this proof of concept is not necessarily it might not be the direction we take, but it's just it's an idea that we ran with and we think is good enough to demonstrate to this group. And personally, I hope we go with it, but it might not be the best path. So with that, how are we doing this? We got two different platforms, if you will. We got .NET Framework, which is one we all know of DNN, and then we got this vNext, which is a solution that we started building out in .NET Core. So the idea here is I'm going to be able to build one Razor Pages module, and it is going to be a cross-platform assembly that we can then install into DNN targeting .NET Framework or DNN vNext targeting .NET Core. So what that means is with all of the different types of .NET assemblies. So .NET Standard has implementations for .NET Core, .NET Framework, Mono, and a couple other different ones out there that really aren't used that much. But the point is, in the .NET ecosystem, you have all sorts of different target frameworks that your assembly can target, and they have different APIs available to them. So the Microsoft has come up with patterns to build an assembly that has a unified API across your different platforms, but have different implementations depending where you're targeting. So the idea for us here is, if we're targeting DNN and .NET Framework using our Razor pages, we're going to be using this new Razor page module platform that I put together that currently works in a fork of DNN platform that will use those APIs. But if we are in targeting VNext and .NET Core, we're not going to be using the same API. We're not going to be using the same implementations because Razor pages is supported natively in .NET Core, so we don't need to reverse engineer like we did for .NET Framework. But as far as a module developer is concerned, the APIs are going to be identical. So what I did is I created a Razor Pages module SDK. And like I was just saying, the SDK has two implementations. It's got a .NET Framework implementation and .NET Core. So as far as your module development goes, all you're going to do is reference that NuGet package. And then when you install it, it's going to use the appropriate DLLs that go with it. Again, your SDK is going to be identical. There's no changes for that module depending if you deploy it in .NET Framework or .NET Core. The installer is just going to know to use, if we're in .NET Core, we got to use our core assemblies. We're in .NET Framework, we got to use our .NET Framework
assemblies. Just a question.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think I've done the same thing, but I just want to be sure we're talking about the same thing. Basically, it's the same code, but it builds to different platforms, right? You would have like one solution, you'd build it one way with .NET Standard 2, or you would build it with .NET Framework 4.6 or something. And in both cases,
yeah.
you'd have a solution, but you'd actually have a different install package just based on the same code.
Oh, the idea so we haven't really looked very deeply into the different install packages, but the idea will be that you will be, so it'll pretty much be that. So you'll have a .NET Core implementation and a .NET Framework implementation, but as far as the module developer goes, the code is going to be the same. And I'll show everyone at the end when we get to the demo portion what the actual code looks like. And as far as packaging that stuff up, as far as your install file, we don't necessarily need to have all you need to have is SDK. So what actually happens under the hood is the SDK, there's three assemblies. There's the SDK assembly, which is the abstract API that works everywhere. Then there's a .NET Framework SDK and a .NET Core SDK. And so that's, I'm sorry?
Like a bridge just to connect
exactly.
the SDK to each platform.
Yeah, exactly. The example that I'm using to explain it a lot, since I do a lot of mobile development in Xamarin, is if you've ever done anything like that, you have a shared code library and you have platform-specific libraries, and that's kind of the same exact idea here. So in DNN, our modules are now going to have a shared code library, and then depending on which platform we install it in, .NET Framework or .NET Core, we're going to use the appropriate assemblies for that.
Okay, good.
But the thing that I can't stress enough is, as far as developing the module, you don't need to put any compiler flags in there. Everything is just going to be handled for you from the SDK level. All right. So, this page is talking about, leveraging Razor pages in our VNext implementation. A couple of the things about going from DNN platform to VNext that are important to note. The Razor pages modules idea is currently the migration path that we're entertaining. We can obviously go and look at the other module types that we have in there and how we can port them, but we don't really, in my opinion, we don't really need to look too heavily in that, because MVC is already supported. SPA is already supported in .NET Core, and right now our VNext solution is using Razor pages and MVC side by side. So once we come up with a little bit more of a standard of building modules in VNext, if we choose to go that direction, it'll be really easy for developers to start developing what they're used to outside of DNN and an MVC or Web API project, and just shipping that as a module in vNext. Because the MVC module for current DNN is forced to work in the web forms framework, which caused a lot of problems in building that out. So moving to vNext, we're not going to run into those headaches. So a lot of that code we don't need to bring over. We just get. So I wanted to highlight our requirements that we came up with for this proof of concept. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and these were our big goals. We wanted to implement Razor Pages support into current DNN. So what does that mean? We wanted to be able to render a Razor page and a code behind at bare minimum. Some limitations with that. If you're familiar with Razor Pages, there's methods such as onGet, onPost. We don't have those implemented yet. Right now, we're just doing simple model binding to prove the concept. We created a DNN vNext project. It's a lightweight implementation of what the admin functionality is in DNN current. We created a Razor Pages SDK that supports both .NET Framework and .NET Core, so we can install it on both projects. And the big thing that we did, and I got to take my hat off to Clint and Mitch for helping out with this, is ported over the existing DNN database into Entity Framework using code first and code first migrations. So with this proof of concept, a big goal is we should be able to use our existing DNN database to make a simple migration path from DNN current to vNext. All right, so let's go take a look at the demo here. So before we get into the code, I wanted to show you, a running website here with the fork that I built. So let me just reload it. And what we're going to show here is I currently kind of see what I already did in some tests here. I got two DNN Razor Pages modules, and right now they're not installed. So I wanted to show everyone that I can install some modules. So let me open up the installer here. So I got these two modules. One's called Razor Pages module, and one's called Razor Pages module 2. So let's go and install them. And what we're going to be showing here is in DNN platform, we can have, we have this working, it's not fully robust ready for the pull request yet, but we have it working. We have multiple Razor Pages modules that can live side by side and so forth. So let me just reload the page and I will start adding in these modules to show you what it looks like. And then we'll go and look at the module code itself.
Just a question. You said you had to fork DNN to do this. So you had to make changes to the platform for this specific demo?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I did is I added a new module pipeline. So and it's Razor Pages. So basically, what that allows us to do when we're ready to load a module in DNN platform, we have the manifest file for all of our modules, and what happens now is we have some configuration inside that manifest file that is specific to Razor Pages to inject the appropriate pipeline. So currently, let's say you built an MVC module, you might have your controller.mvc reference as your control source inside your manifest file. So now with Razor Pages, you do something similar, but you use an extension of .razor pages. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to know that this is a Razor Pages module that we've installed and that we need to inject the Razor Pages pipeline, which is really just a fork of the MVC pipeline currently. There's still a little bit of code that needs to be cleaned up, but the point is that we do have a separate module platform inside of DNN platform to load our Razor Pages. So, now that answer your question?
Sure. Yep. Good.
All right, cool. So this is just a very simple page that we got, a module that we added that's just displays some text on the screen. I got another one which just displays a simple bootstrap form. And so let's go look at some of the code for both of these. Move the wall faces. All right. So let's look at the first one here. So this is a Razor Pages module. Okay. A couple things to note here. It looks very similar to any type of DNN module that we've created. Looking at our pages, following the Razor Pages convention, we've put our different pages inside the pages folder. We only have one in our case. So our index.cshtml here is, it's very similar to how we've done some of our, Razor page templating in DNN currently. We still use that inherits functionality to put our model in, but in our case here, we're referencing the Razor Pages SDK, and then we specify our actual model. And let's take a look at our model code. Our model is going to inherit from DNN page model, and we chose that name because in Razor Pages, all the pages code behind inherit from page model. And so now we are able to specify, our model information. And looking back at the other page here, very simply, we're able to bind to that. And that's a simple one. The other one I did is, oops, we'll undo that. The other one I did is still kind of simple on the same idea. We just specified a welcome message again, and we just got a little bit more markup in this file. Now, what we ended up doing in the manifest files for this is scrolling down. The big thing here is this control source where you reference your actual Razor page, and this is where the new module pipeline will pick up that we need to inject the Razor Pages code. So then, looking back at DNN platform here, if I close the editor, one of the important things that I kind of glazed over earlier is we have two separate Razor Pages modules running on the same page here. So my point is that we are able to get this module pipeline working side by side currently with other modules on the screen, which is a big accomplishment, and is only a handful of little code quality things and issues that we need to clean up to get this ready for a pull request in the platform. Before I move into vNext, is there any questions on the platform code I just showed off? No?
Do you know what an MVP is?
What?
Do you know what an MVP is?
Minimal viable product?
Sorry, that's just a joke. I thought
I would have a question.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, this at the component level, this is similar, of course, to what we already have. So I have two questions. First of all, like the submit button, would that do something now, or how would you wire that up to any action?
Yeah, so you can find this information in the actual Razor Pages documentation, and I want this to be feature parity with .NET-Core Razor Pages. Otherwise, the whole game doesn't work, right? But basically, the way that you would do it is, if I wanted to do additional logic inside of a GET request, by convention you can do on GET, and by convention you can do on POST. And then the $1 million question is, how do you get to your database stuff? And in .NET Core, you would just inject your DB context to access it. We still got to figure out an appropriate way to get access to your ORM, and that was kind of a problem that we decided to table for this proof of concept. But we have been talking about building something similar to the SDK that will work on both platforms, to kind of be like a new implementation of the data access layers that we have in DNN currently.
Okay, because for me the question is not even the data access layer, but like the on get or the on post would probably fire at the moment. Like if you had the form in there 3 times, the on post would probably fire 3 times, right?
So if we had the form in there 3 times, I would hope we can get it to work in a similar fashion of how the MVC framework works, and we should be able to filter it out based on the module ID.
Okay.
But that's something that kind of went outside the scope of this demo, but it is definitely, if we decide as a group to move forward with this idea, that's something that we definitely should look at almost immediately, is how we're going to handle on gets and on posts.
Okay. And just a note, in case you want to follow up on this later on, if you're worrying about dependency injection, I'm using the .NET Core dependency injection in DNN already for like about a year successfully. So if you'd like to, if you would like to follow up on that, just contact me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be a really cool idea as part of Razor Pages to support some type of dependency injection, so it's really easy to access stuff like your ORM or other objects that you need that are shared across your different pages and models. Cool. Anyone else before I move on to the VNext stuff?
I would have one more question.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I'm here.
No.
Right now we're talking about the components. Did you also consider scaling this out to the page? Or not yet?
No, so you're saying like make it more of a page level and not a module level?
Exactly, because until we get the page level figured out, it's still hard. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to solve that problem too, but I'm just asking.
No, so this was focused. So this is all about using Razor Pages as a platform for our module. So taking, right now we have MVC modules, we have Web4 modules, we have, I think we have a couple other ones in there as well. But we wanted to add, the biggest problem about going from DNN Current to VNext is how we can get all these module developers and modules that already exist into the next platform with as little headaches as possible. So this is about building that migration path of something that is in VNext, is highly supported by Microsoft, but it's still a similar pattern to web forms. Because at the end of the day, web forms is a view and a code behind. Razor Pages is the same thing. It's not one-to-one, but it's the same general concept.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Right. I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So I was thrown off a bit at the beginning when you said, and it will, and it will target VNext as well, since it's still a hypothetical platform that we're talking about. But okay, so I get it. This is your what you guys think will be the next platform. I think that will be a lot of pushing and pulling there as well. I think it absolutely, it's a no-brainer that this is the way to go. But as a module developer, of course, I'm very keen to make sure that this becomes an even better module development experience than we've had until now in everything that we have. So one of the things I'd love to see is, for instance, your access to within a module. I mean, you always work within a context of DNN. Otherwise, you might as well create some kind of a web app that is independent. I'm not too concerned with that. What I love is the integration with the platform that gives me information about what page I'm on, like the user, all kinds of objects that we usually deal with. So I guess that's all hidden in the DNN page model in the same way that it's done in MVC, in the MVC module.
Yeah.
And so yeah, if you and also given that DNN page model then comes from your SDK thing, right?
Yeah, so I just went into the definition of the DNN page model, and that was actually a really great question, and I'll do the same thing when we get over to the .NET Core code. But a lot of this stuff should look very familiar if you have any intimate knowledge of how the MVC platform works. So, this is extending our DNN view result. We have a bunch of different objects that we use for rendering out our MVC platform.
I see that. That's cool. So, I mean, I think that all runs very, very similar to MVC. In terms of namespacing, SDK so it means that the end user then has to separately install an SDK, or is this just a naming convention that you have to call everything underneath this as SDK?
So I named it SDK because, for a module developer, they don't need to reference, .NET Nuke libraries. They just pull in the NuGet reference to the SDK. That SDK NuGet has everything they need. So one of the problems as someone that's relatively new to DNN still is building modules. I found that I needed to reference. I needed to create like a lib folder with the .NET Nuke files, maybe the MVC file assemblies, and it was kind of I found it as something hard for me to overcome.
That point is taken. I'm just wondering how, let's see. So if my DLL with all these references to SDK gets packaged into a module, but then gets delivered without that SDK DLL, it will bomb, no?
So platform also is reliant on the SDK DLL. So
Okay.
if
so it's basically just an extra DLL.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I get it. You just stuck a new DLL in there. You call it SDK for the end developers, basically.
Yeah.
Users won't actually see it. So
no, they won't.
It takes a bit of a sidestep from what we're used to. Then let's see, the actual entities themselves, they don't come out of DNN anymore. They come from razorpages.sdk. So a user, for instance, a user object now becomes a user object that's underneath Razorpages SDK. Am I correct?
So kind of.
Okay.
So right now, and this is part of the thing that I need, I have further conversations with, an architect of DNN, is how should we do this? And while we're taking into account, I want module developers' life to be super easy. Personally, I think, we should release an SDK or whatever we call it as a NuGet, so they can just reference that NuGet into their package and not have to worry about anything else.
I don't disagree with that, and I think NuGet is definitely, that's the Microsoft way to go. I hate NuGet, but that's beside the point. I mean,
right.
You prefer something like NPM or Yarn or something, but going beyond that, to have some kind of packages. Yeah, but there is, for instance, a choice that's going to be an interesting one, and I think that needs a wider debate as well. Whether you will fragment the platform into a whole bunch of different like NuGet bits, like you say, I need users, so I'm going to use .NET.users NuGet package or something.
Right.
Or are you going to go monolithic and say, no, we have an abstraction layer that encompasses the entire platform, and it's just called SDK, and that's what you use.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things I wanted to mention with the SDK. So currently with the fork, there's a problem that I ran into when I was building out the SDK was for platform. There was a lot of things from the actual Razor pages. So let's talk about 3 different assemblies real quick. So we have MVC.razorpages, we have MVC, and we have MVC.razorpages.sdk. So the MVC.razorpages assembly was a fork of MVC to get Razor Pages work. It was the easiest way to get Razor Pages working inside of web forms because a lot of the heavy lifting's already been done for us.
Yeah.
So then enter our MVC Razor Pages SDK, and I wanted to keep that as lightweight as possible. But the problem was our DNN view result, as you can see, is tightly coupled to a lot of things going on here. And then I started to have to pull a bunch of code out of MVC Razor Pages and put it in the SDK to get everything to play nicely together. And that's where your concern has a lot of merit of, well, do we want everything to be fragmented or do we want it to be one giant assembly? I as much as I like NuGet, I think NuGet's the direction to go. It's a tough call with how DNN is structured. From my experience and the direction Microsoft has taken with .NET Core, you'll hear both sides of the argument of, no, you need one giant assembly or you need a bunch of small ones. I remember when .NET Core was first released, their big argument was, let's ship releases often and make them small, and then people can just pull in all the NuGets. But
guys, I don't mean to like interject and interrupt, but we are at like almost 20 till.
All right. Well, this is a very important discussion though, and I think it requires
follow up in the Slack, with the debates.
All right.
All right, Peter, if you would like, we can also set up a meeting where we can discuss detail and have other people join if they have time.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. So let's go over and take a look at the vNext code. All right. So since we've been talking a lot about the details, we'll go over the Razor and the code behind real quick, and then we'll show what vNext looks like running. So let's start with the code behind first. So we'll just move that over. This looks almost identical to what we had on the other screen, right?
Yeah.
Let me just go back to the actual. Yeah, so this is what we had in platform, and this is what we have in vNext. It's pretty much identical. And to illustrate what's going on under the hood here, you'll notice that we're not looking at the DNN, what was it, view result. We're not looking at the DNN view result. We're actually referencing now the .NET Core MVC Razor pages page model. So this is really important to note that we are still using the same exact SDK, but under the hood of the SDK, depending on which platform we're in, it will target the appropriate model code. And building a unified API at that SDK layer is really what's going to make this super powerful. Right now, the .NET Core stuff doesn't have access to all the stuff that we, I was on the right page, all this different stuff that we have in DNN world because, well, vNext doesn't have all that stuff yet. It's really lightweight still. But that's kind of the goal, is to be able to access the same context information in that DNN page model in both platforms. Looking at our view code here, it's more or less identical. We had to make a couple of changes for .NET Core. The commented out code was the original code that we copied over, and the markup at the top is the new stuff that I had to add. I didn't really have I ran out of time of figuring out how to kind of bridge the gap on these two, but ideally we won't have the highlighted code up here at the top. We will just use the exact same syntax that we have, but I didn't get a chance to finish looking in how to override some of the Razor syntax there. Yep. All right, let's run it.
So Andrew,
yeah,
you mentioned that it's creating the database on the fly, right?
Yeah. So we just saw at a breakpoint hit. Right now, it's running a migration script that is building the database using code first. With that, we'll have a database that is identical to currently what we have in DNN. Ideally, the idea here is we're going to be able to make a migration path from platform with minimal changes to the database, if any changes to the database, and that's. I've worked on some pretty large databases at the enterprise level, and doing database migrations can be a real nightmare. And if we're able to promise customers that our database will be very similar in schema-wise with a small migration script, that will make transitioning from .NET Framework to .NET Core super simple. So we created this demo page to simulate adding modules into DNN vNext. So let's go and add a module. Right now we already have one installed, and it's called HTML editor here. You can ignore that. It's just a name an arbitrary name that we chose. But we're able to add this module on the screen, and it's the exact same thing that we just saw in platform. And this is, if I get out of this editor mode and I refresh the page, you see it's showing up there, and we're using the DNN database under the hood to render this on the screen. I can go and start adding more of these on the screen if I wanted to.
And Andrew, isn't it Entity Framework Core that's persisting the data?
Well, right now, yes and no. So the module, I'm going to focus on the scope of the modules right now. So the modules themselves are not doing anything with an ORM yet. They can, but we weren't able to come up with, we didn't have time for a cross-platform solution. So this demo is not focusing on anything that deals with the database. But the other stuff of, that requires loading stuff outside of the module context, we will is currently using Entity Framework Core in this solution. All right. So that's really all I had to show for vNext. This is just a proof of concept, so there's no like login functionality. We did do some fancy work with UI elements around here, but Clint has done a lot of work for us in CSS and getting stuff to where it needs to be, while others have focused on the actual implementation side of stuff. But
I was going to say, man, hover over the menus a little bit, click on some stuff.
All right, I'll click on some stuff. Clint did some good work here.
Close icon. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, man.
So you guys built the persona bar, sort of like?
Yeah, we built the persona bar in like a week. No big deal.
Man,
the more time consuming.
Does it still have Knockout.js in it?
No.
So this is built with just MVC Razor pages. A little, I think we have one MVC controller and a bunch of jQuery and CSS. And that's it.
There's no iframe there. That's like a partial. But to be honest, at least from my standpoint, the thing that was most time consuming was my entire last weekend creating the entire DNN database. Thankfully, Mitchell has gone behind me and enforced some relationships that I forgot. But
so if I understand correctly, there is this vNext has a database, which is DNN database platform, like hundreds of tables. I don't know about stored procedures. And then you have a rendering engine already built?
Yeah, so with .NET Core ASP.NET, we already have a rendering engine. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel with any of this
No,
stuff.
I mean the module, understanding the module and the panes and themes and things like that. What all have you built here?
We built out that so what our template looks like is, if I open up our demo page.
Ash is smiling and he's just like shredding all these documents next to him about to-do stuff for the next few years.
Yeah. So nothing's perfect here, and it was really just a proof of concept. But this is a template we built for the demo page, and we're just using some Bootstrap or specifying out the different IDs for the different module areas, if you will. And we're doing a lot of jQuery with this, so there might be a front end framework, whether it's Knockout, Vue, React. It doesn't really matter to me, but we might want to update that in the future. As far as the layouting engine goes, looking back at this screen here, if you have gotten really into the weeds with layouts in Razor syntax, it's a super powerful engine where this persona bar, now we don't need to make it an iframe. We can specify it as a layout. So if the user is logged in as an administrator, we can inject that layout into the view and then always draw it on the screen. And we can do that same thing, that same concept applies with the control bar at the bottom. So a lot of the things where we had to...
Andrew?
I'm sorry?
Previously, it was part of the document, but it always ended up injecting too much CSS and things like that into the main layout, which caused too much trouble.
Okay.
So actually putting in an iframe took a big problem away.
That's a really good point. And
it added a bunch more.
That's true. It's not perfect, but actually, otherwise it's terrible actually for designers in the previous. It's not perfect yet either, but there's just too much CSS coming from DNN. And the moment it's part of the page, that would happen again.
Right. No, that's a really good point that we didn't really consider as far as the proof of concept goes. And we can certainly put it back as an iframe, and we can still use the same layouting engine to render that iframe. And that way, we can. My point is, we can still take advantage of the layout rendering engine. We don't need to custom build how we're going to inject that into the pipeline. We get it for free.
That sounds like a great pull request opportunity, Daniel. I think it may be powerful if you open up SQL Server, show them the database, delete the database, refresh the app.
Yeah.
Can I Ashley, just very quickly, we're talking about pull requests and getting it into the platform. I think for something this with such a major it's very ambitious, first of all, right? To come up with a new module new module pattern and a new rendering pipeline. And we're going to get a lot of people on board to make sure that this becomes a success. So my first thought is to start working on this fork and make sure that that module pattern is as solid as it can be, because I think that needs to be explored, right? So besides the funky namespaces, we need to work out how you can build something with a whole bunch of views and posting back and working all that kind of stuff out. From my point of view, and that is something we might need to throw into the group, and we need to talk to the folks at DNN, of course, as well. Is I think it's past the stage of like, do you think we should go down this path? I think that is a yes, probably from all parties concerned. I think it is the best, the most viable migration path I've seen to date for DNN, right? Because the goal was just for, I think Nick, who hasn't been here in the previous meetings, is to get developers to start developing on a module pattern that is future-proof, will require minimal changes if we start tugging the platform to a new technology being vNext. So if we can tick that box with this, and I think that has been demonstrated, then I think now we should look in more detail, like how this module pattern should work and how we can, make both simple but also complex modules on top of that.
Right. So you bring up a couple good points, Peter. Though I would love to talk more about. And one of the big things is, what APIs do we want to expose in this module pattern, and how can we make these APIs future-proof, as you just said? So right now, the SDK supports a bunch of stuff that is pulled right out of the DNN MVC platform. Now, that stuff probably shouldn't be supported in .NET Core, but there might be some APIs in there that we do want to expose, like the DNN URL handler. That being able to handle routing, I think is huge, and we need to make sure that we're following a .NET Core Razor Pages pattern of that. And that might not be using the DNN URL helper. We might need to build a new type of URL component to handle the routing. And we need to come up with a list of those APIs and make sure that they are public underneath that DNN page model. And then anything that is specific to platform needs to be internal. And that way the module developer is only able to access the appropriate APIs that we can guarantee will work on both platforms.
Yeah, and it builds on something that I actually proposed for a while already, which is to build a new abstraction layer above the framework that module developers can program against, so that we can redo the API, because that's one of the other tasks that we have to do to get to vNext, is clean up the API, because it is a huge mess. So, and one of the major, I think, factors in impeding developers to come to the platform. So that has to happen one way or another. And if you now encourage people to use the ancient DNN API that is there, they still have to reprogram once we get to the future. So the opportunity is there to make this project the definitive project on how we migrate.
Cool, great stuff.
I have a question for Andrew.
Yeah.
So in a typical MVC kind of development scenario, you abstract away a lot of code under attributes and filters. Is it your vision to support those kind of things, like the standard MVC attributes and filters?
So yes and no, and I guess I say that a lot. But so whatever, my goal is feature parity with .NET Core Razor Pages. So some of the stuff might not be there for filter attributes. I'm not 100% sure what feature, let's say an action filter. I don't know if that has been brought over to Razor Pages because it's been a lot simpler. So feature parity is my goal. I don't want us to necessarily add in anything new to Razor Pages that goes outside the scope of .NET-Core Razor Pages, because then we got to maintain that. And the nice thing about .NET Core is we should be able, we'll get MVC for free. So anything that you can do in MVC, if you need that, you can build an MVC module. But as far as doing, filters in Razor Pages, that's a feature that we will have to look into. And I don't have a better answer than that right now.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Andrew, I will say awesome job. Thanks for taking initiative. Everybody, I hope you see the links here and get active on. Yeah. So, Andrew, are you going to share your address so people could perhaps send you beer?
Maybe. We'll see.
But all right. So, Daniel, do you still want to present? If so, Andrew, you can stop sharing, and then Daniel just hit share screen on yours.
Yeah. Is it okay if we overdraw by a few minutes?
Yeah,
fine.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me just find out again how I present. Each tool is a little different here. Where do I present?
At the bottom, there should be able to hover and
Share
see.
screen. Okay. Okay. Do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So this is a different topic, but it's partially related. So let's look at this. So it's about Connect.Koi, and the goal is, of course, that everybody understands the framework challenges we're trying to solve here, and that we've come up with a solution that should make it very easy to do. And background is, of course, I believe, I hope most of you actually made websites already using DNN, and basically, a lot of people today use Bootstrap 3. That's the status. Now, most components, with components, I'm talking about modules, basically. They also use Bootstrap 3, or they use their own CSS. That's the current, the status quo. And a very typical pattern you'll see today is that most components will actually include Bootstrap 3 again, just to be sure that there is a Bootstrap 3 loaded in the page. And other developers actually are we're not going to use Bootstrap 3 because it's going to clash with whatever is already on the page. And that's already a big problem, right? You're kind of almost standardized on something, and it already causes a lot of side effects. Because even at the status quo, before we're going to talk about Bootstrap 4 and everything, if people add a component to any page, typically, very, very often it looks shitty when you just start out. So you download any component, third-party module, you install it, and the first experience is usually terrible. And so that's why developers tend to include Bootstrap again. Of course, adding extra load on the browser, taking more download time. And when things start to look bad, it's really hard to debug because you have to figure out which of these multiple frameworks. There's websites out there that have Bootstrap 3 or 4 times included. Once from local, once from a CDN, and then maybe a dot version different from another CDN. And whenever you install a component or do any upgrade, you're typically going to end up having to fix other components because just something doesn't work right. And what's also important to note is at the moment, all the pages on a solution need the same framework. This sounds trivial again, but in cases where you want to just make a pop-up to show an input form or something, maybe you want to use Angular material or something, but typically your Bootstrap 3 component then doesn't look right anymore in that. So in other words, there's a lot of problems today already. So if we're going into the future, there's Bootstrap 4, there's Foundation 6, and there's a bunch of other things as well. And of course, we know it's going to change from Bootstrap 3. Bootstrap 3 is more or less end of life. And one of my core wishes in this solution is people should be able to add components today and update the skin tomorrow, and it should still not look crappy. And those are things that are basically impossible today. So basically, I'm going to show a live demo briefly. I'm going to first show like what the current situation is. Do you see my browser?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a page. It's Bootstrap 3. Let me just reload it briefly. And I'm going to go to the site settings, and I'm going to switch it over to a foundation, just as an example. Now, of course, most people don't go around switching the skin, but what actually happens is they will typically, you know, they have a site, they have it installed, they install a component, and then something that looked nice on the developer side suddenly ends up looking like this. That's real life. So the pictures that should have been nicely side by side in the previous example, this is what it looks like now. And so that's the current situation. These are just screenshots I made to be safe in case that something wouldn't work afterwards. So the idea is, of course, to connect this. So I'm just going to go to another live demo. So first of all, I'm going to switch over to a skin which does not broadcast its framework. I'm using some of Jeff's work here, so other people's skins. It's a Bootstrap 4 skin. And in this case, I'm going to refresh again, and it's still going to look crappy because our template cannot detect what CSS framework is being used. So there's no way the component can simply say, okay, well, you switched over to Bootstrap 4, so let's just use slightly different styling. Now I'm going to switch over, and this last edition simply has a tiny JSON file in the folder, which lets the system automatically detect what framework it was intended for. So now we're going to Bootstrap 4. And if I now reload the page, it can pick it up and it'll automatically look nice. So this is now Bootstrap 4. The initial one that looked right was Bootstrap 3. And you'll see like the color is orange because Jeff's theme had orange for the headings and things like that. And so our vision is to make this possible seamlessly. Basically, the idea is you should be able to install a component. It should realize what framework is being used, and it should look nice right away. Again, my backup screenshots. Okay, so for the skins and the themes, we figured we need to find a solution because the skins don't really have a benefit of proclaiming, broadcasting what they're using. So we wanted to make sure for them it's super, super simple. So they just have to add a config file because that way they have no side effects. They don't have to like have an extra testing load when they're creating a new theme or skin. They just include the file and that's it. They don't need to include this, the module. And if they don't have it, the skin can act, I mean, the component can like detect and say, okay, I don't know what framework is used. I'm going to include Bootstrap 3 now just to be safe, for example. If a component uses this, they can easily just include the Connect.Koi. And as we know, DNN will only install it if it's newer than the previous one. And let's say the core feature of Connect.Koi is that it simply communicates what framework is being used. Now, we've added some additional sugar just to make it nicer to create templates, but that's actually not necessary. If somebody wants to like put the variations like Foundation 6, Bootstrap 4, whatever separately, they can do it any way they want to. Let me just briefly show you a code file here, just so you have an idea what it looks like. So here's a razor template. And basically the only thing that's kind of special is like this line here, which instead of saying class is row, it says in case of Bootstrap 3, well, in this case, it's not very exciting. So it's like, yeah, it's row in both cases. Or over here, there's also class, which just says in case all elements get the first thing here, all of them, Bootstrap 3 will get these, Bootstrap 4 will get these, for example. But again, this is just the way we're saying this is like a nice add-on tool, but the main power is broadcasting what framework is being used and making it available in the components. So if somebody doesn't like this syntax, totally fine with me. They can use something different, but just making sure their code knows what framework is used. So you could even make resource files or something, and instead of using languages as your code, you could use the framework as the code, etc.
So I have a question for you on that.
Go ahead.
So I've done a lot with Bootstrap 3, 4, and Foundation 5 and 6. And one thing that I've noticed is the grid, how they style all the grids and such are very similar, but there are cases where they diverge quite a bit. And right now, the way that you're demonstrating that only shows that we can do it at the and for your example there, the div level. But you also said that you could also set it up to have multiple files for that, right?
Yeah, that'll be, for example. So I created a website. It's on GitHub, and basically, if we look at the API at the moment, basically any template can like pick up the code from here. There's a Koi CSS which will give us the code. So if you would then like prefer to use multiple files and switch between them, this is what you could use as your marker.
Okay.
Because yes, that's basically for us, it was important to like make a very minimum viable solution again, because we were pretty sure everybody's going to have their own preference on how they want to solve it. And the minimum solution is actually just broadcasting it and picking it up, plus a standardized set of codes. Because if somebody used Bootstrap 3 as a code and the other one used BS3 as a code, then your component couldn't pick it up. So there's a standardized list of codes that should be used. So like anything Foundation 6 or BS3, BS4 would be standardized now. Foundation 7 isn't standardized yet, but it should be reserved for future releases, that kind of stuff. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So about the code as well, it's currently, I wanted to make sure it runs on DNN 7.0 because again, I wanted to make sure that if people have components that they're distributing today, and a lot of people are still targeting DNN 7, that they can already use Koi and not like have to say, I'm only going to use it once DNN 9 is the standard. So it's DNN 7 compatible, 7.02 or something, but it's basically 7.0. But the code inside Koi is also dual compiling. So you can build it for .NET Standard or you can build it for .NET 4.5. So the code is all compliant there. In other words, we're also ready for a step forward once that will ever happen. And of course, it's MIT. And we're not doing it under the label of our company, but under the DNN Connect Foundation, because I think that should also help to get a broader adoption, because it's not like personally tied to me or something. So where are we? The concept's clear. Version 1 is out. Documentation side is created. We have very simple and clear instruction for the skin developers. They can even download like their sample Koi JSON for Bootstrap 4, which even has a little help text for the person finding this file the first time, and just the code which says this is the framework that's used. We have instructions and API for the template users and for the component developers. So for me, the next big step is to include this simple config file in as many themes as possible, so the component devs then can start picking up on it. And I would prefer not to include the solution, not the software, in any one of the next releases of DNN, simply because it's very possible that based on input, like maybe there's a much better way of writing the syntax for including the different variations and things like that. And I'd like the community to kind of work that out as it works with it the first year. And if we would include it as a standard component already, it would immediately like set the level at the 1.0 version, which would kind of suck.
Yeah, I agree.
And then once it's matured, of course, it would be nice if it could be installed, but if I'm also more fan of auto-installing dependencies than including it in the primary thing.
So Daniel, so if I understand, so you're interested just in the JSON file to be included into the platform today?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, in that Cavalier skin.
I think you have 1 or 2 skins that you include.
Yeah, Gravity, I can't remember if we're still shipping that or not, yeah.
Zillion.
Zillion, sorry, yeah, not Cavalier, yeah, Zillion, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that in the next
That
one.
was included then from that moment on forward, any component which ships Koi with itself, and of course uses that, will automatically look right on a DNN skin.
All right, right now, Daniel, if I'm correct, right now you focused on a server-side solution for this, right? It picks up a JSON on the server side, and then it parses it does your magic on the rendering of the page as it's floated out to the client side.
Yeah.
I think it would be probably trivial to add some functionality also on the client side, that at least because there's a big DNN object that floats around in JavaScript that we sometimes use as front-end developers, because we need to know our module ID or something to get some resource or whatever. I could totally see also the front end include an object that has a name we can all depend on from JavaScript to find out what CSS framework we're currently rendering in.
Yeah. So basically, at the moment, since there's no standard for it yet, you could just simply do something like script and then var CSS framework equals app.koi.css and put brackets around it. So that would be the cheap solution today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing, I'm afraid, would already require a deeper integration, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, this obviously, yeah, that would be part of what I think the framework could do for you in the future.
Yeah. And just so one thing I forgot to mention is we also took care of the Ajax scenario because in Ajax scenarios, you sometimes actually don't even have the skin around it. So actually what Koi does is it checks what page, what tab am I on, and actually even in Ajax scenarios, will check what skin this component would have so that Ajax rendering also correctly renders.
Yeah. Nice.
Daniel, I have a question. Could you evolve this so that instead of just broadcasting the framework, since you're supporting a finite number of frameworks, where you could detect a framework that is in use and transpile it on the fly based on whatever page framework is in use?
Do you mean like could we invent the correct CSS for each framework?
Yeah, no, like for example, sort of like if I have a module that's using Bootstrap 4, but the page is running Bootstrap 3, you would transpile it down to Bootstrap 3 on the fly.
I mean, let's say it's maybe possible, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, the other option would be to come up with a Koi set of classes, etc. And if you use those, it automatically replaces it with whatever framework is on the page, and that could be.
The complicated thing is that actually, as frameworks develop, they tend to like use new browser features that let the developer use a different HTML structure.
Right, exactly. The shape sometimes changes.
My simple example with the classes is probably the 80% scenario. But even going from Bootstrap 3 to Bootstrap 4 allows you to write better HTML and not just swap classes. So there are some things that translate, like Bootstrap 4 has different breaking points for mobile devices. And of course, you could transpile that, but that's a pretty trivial thing. In reality, for example, the flex box means you don't need certain JavaScripts to, like in Bootstrap 3, if these boxes had different text heights, it's really hard to make sure they have the same height and they look nice. And in Bootstrap 4, that's very easy to do. So in other words, I think going that path is close to impossible to produce anything reliable. And that's why I would like to try to not solve that problem, at least not today. For me, reliability is key. I think it's kind of like I'd rather promise something that is, let's say, almost too trivial if you look at it the first time, but say that works, than try to promise something that is so sophisticated that it'll probably fail in real life. Yep, so questions? Yeah, that's where we were anyways. You guys go ahead.
I think I think you definitely have to come to Ireland to present this.
No
I'm still working on Daniel.
Daniel,
Yeah.
we will be including this in the quick thing. I think you're doing a great job on it.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, and then we go ahead and submit the pull request for the JSON file, and we'll put it into our development branch, which is 921, right? 92 is already branched and everything. Should be fine.
Okay, so 9.2, it won't make 9.2 anymore in that case, huh?
No, yeah, 92 is already branched. Yeah.
Okay, does that mean the release is coming out like the next 2 days or something?
Not 2 days, 2 weeks. Yeah, this is, guys, I want to give you a quick update on where things are with the release. So we've been working with a newer team who's testing it, and they're not just comfortable yet to hand it over. So is that nervousness in the team right now. So we're going to take a little bit of time, but the core, there's some bug fixes. There's some bug fixes with the tree, the page management, and as soon as that stabilizes, we should be able to release it. So we're still looking at 2 weeks, I think.
Okay.
But we're not doing any new development there at all. It's just making sure that it's good to release.
Yep.
Well, you better get that process sorted out correctly.
Exactly. So once we have that, it should be pretty sweet after that.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll have, let's say, more frequent releases in the future? Because I think that's something at least the community side is a little nervous about.
Do you want more or do you want less?
I think it's always the same thing. I think we would like to have some stable ones, but for anybody needing something new, it always feels like an eternity between releases.
So
I mean,
yeah, it has been eternity for this particular one, but the mandate in the ESW umbrella of companies is that they have a program called as SE7, ship every 7 days. Every week, their goal is to have every product to a point where it's shippable every 7 days. Me as a product owner, so just so you guys know, I'm taking over the role of product owner for DNN. So so I'll be the one who's sort of signing off on the release and making sure the release is good, that so that it adds some value to everybody. So the goal is that the engineering team will hand it over to me every week as soon as this whole process gets going. And then it would be my decision, sort of working with everybody else, whether we actually release it or not to the public, because not everybody likes releases every week. But I think, why would I stop it, right? If the process is good and the product is mature, then
can I just add a little,
right?
Yeah, can I add a little note to that, because it's one of those pet peeves of mine as well. That for a long time it was hard to get a really stable release of DNN, and that's possibly due to the fact that it was, of course, there's a lot of work involved in creating a release that is safe. Like, you guys do a lot of testing, so there's a lot of time that is involved in that. And the quality of the releases have been, in that sense, pretty good. But because of the, let's say, time lag, there's always been a tendency to try to fit, there's a new feature that comes along, like, we should do this. And then, like the Koi thing, right? Okay, well, let's do that in a .x release. And all of a sudden something goes wrong there, and then that needs to be repaired again. But that happens on the .o release. And that has always irked me somewhat. I would love to see .o releases include all the new features that we've bunched up for a while, and then the .x releases to basically just iron out anything that still crops up from incompatibilities from the new features.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good point, Peter. And I think the next release is going to be 921, 922, 923, 924. And then I think I'll have to go back and take a look. I think the liquid content, when it comes to the platform, we'll call it 9.3.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
then as we move along, and then 9.4. But we're going to have multiple point releases after that. 9.1, 9.31, 9.32.
Because then, if you're just doing bug fixes, the 7-day release thing is not so scary for people anymore.
So the feature, there is a separate team that does feature, and the feature will be done in parallel, right? They will get merged when things are ready. And then so we will have to we'll have to manage all that. We're never going to release a shooter release per se that just for the sake of 7 days we'll add a bunch of new features in 7 days. No, that's not going to be possible.
Thanks anyway.
Yeah. Hey, Ash, is that going to change how pull requests are currently accepted at all?
Well, it all depends on the pull request, right? What kind of testing is done, right? It needs to be done. If for something like this, the one that you're proposing, I don't expect that we would do a 7-day release. I would like to manage it. I would like to offer sort of an alpha or something like that to the broader community. So we'll have to work together.
Right. I mean, this is a big pull request, but it's going to be, well, what I'm hearing is depending on the size of the pull request, it might be in a .x or it might be in, a minor version.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Just a question regarding that as well. I mean, basically, one of our core problems, like with Koi, is always there's a first release, and no matter how good it is, there's a certain risk involved, right? And I always kind of prefer the idea of making a module and then like having it tested in the wild before it becoming part of the core solution. So, Andrew, is there any chance that that your concept could run as a module? Does it really require a platform change for installation?
Yes, it does require a platform change for installation. We could try and make it work as a module, but we would, as part of the install process, we would have to overwrite the .NET Nuke DLL.
Because my question is a little bit, what if we would say that the platform would be enhanced with the ability to add a new module pipeline?
Yeah, so what we would have to
with your module.
Right. So here's what we'd have to do is there is a factory built into the .NET Nuke.dll library that checks the manifest file of all the different modules and basically says, okay, this module is an MVC module, inject the MVC pipeline. And in our case, for Razor Pages, this module is a Razor Page module, inject the Razor Pages pipeline. So if we were able to extract that bit of code outside of the .NET Nuke library and then allow some type of extension into that, then yes, we would be able to ship this as a module. But the amount of work that will take, I don't know.
Exactly. I think the pain is too big for the benefit, frankly, Daniel. I know exactly the code he's talking about. There's a bunch of this stuff happening that it will be very painful to try to to have to completely fork out and rewire.
Yeah.
I mean, I could look into it and see code, but yeah. I was gonna say I could look into it and see, like, just spend like 30 minutes or an hour looking at the code and see if there's any extension points that we could add to it. But I agree with Peter that I think it would be difficult to do.
Really, my preference would be to actually package up a forked DNN in this way that people can actually download and that they can then develop a module on. I wouldn't hope that anyone would think, oh, let's install this new bit in production and see how my Razor Pages module goes in production. Obviously this is all for alpha, right?
Yeah. Oh, so that's a good point, Peter. And my biggest question goes to Ash then is there a way that we could set up a nightly build for my fork so we could get people playing with it in the wild and have an install? Or are there build scripts that you can hand off to me and I can set up a build with fthere, which is free for open source? And either way, I'm fine with. But
we can get you. Actually, we wanted to move some of the build scripts out. It's in a private repo. We wanted to actually move it out to the public, so that anybody can build the whole packages thing, right? So that has to happen. We can, I can work with you. Like, we can get you something there.
Yeah.
It has some stuff like evoke stuff there, and it's not used, but it's just there. We just have to get it out. And make it part of the platform, and there's no problem doing that. And that way you can set up. So there are a couple of ways. So you could do that, and you can see how people adopt, kind of a developer adoption. And when that starts to look good, I don't want this to die, right? I don't want,
Right.
Demotivate and things like that. But once people think a group of people, a core group of people, and we always go back to this core group. Now we're not going back to that core group of just only few people, but each project may have a core group, right? Just you're working right now with Mitch and whoever you're working with. As long as you guys are okay, comfortable, you guys feel that it's good to go, let's bring it to the platform, and then we'll say this is available in a preview mode, right? We'll bring in only what is absolutely needed in the platform, and the sample modules, there will be, of course, they will stay outside the platform, right? So that way it will not interface. So my concern is that as long as it doesn't add a security problem, right? It doesn't expose any security issues. It doesn't slow down things, right? As long as those two things are taken care of.
But that's a discussion for a bit later as well. I mean, these are the high level criteria for accepting any kind of major change, right? That you're enumerating.
Right.
Right. And I think we can safely say that we want to go in some way down this route. There is momentum here. Like you said, this is pretty cool. Don't get discouraged by any of this. It would be awesome if those build scripts become available so that Andrew can push the button and then put a DLL on GitHub on his fork to say, okay, well, this is, I just released this one, and we all get to play with it, those that are interested, and start submitting pull requests on that.
So
Repo.
DLL, you can do it yourself, right? I mean, nothing stops you from setting up an appware, right? That's a free.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to do. Is if I can get those build scripts that you guys use at Corp to produce a nightly build that people can download and install. If I get those scripts and they work, I will, matter of 30 minutes for me to set up a build and then let other people go install it. Because right now, install what we've been calling it is fork Kepling. To get fork Kepling installed onto, Dave gave us one of his servers to use. It was just a real pain in the butt to get it all working. We ran into DLL hell, and for someone that's out in the wild right now, it is a nightmare. And I pretty much need to go in there and make sure all the right DLLs are there. So if we get the build scripts and we can set that up with app there, and I can get a CI build running for every time we commit to it, well, then we can start telling people, hey, we got this experimental new module platform. You should go check it out. They can go install their instance and play with it.
Yeah, we can do that. So we create like source package, right? Install package, upgrade package, symbol package.
Those.
I guess you want all of those. I don't know what name would you want to give. Like I think we're at 9.2, right? I think you're at a full. I don't want people to get confused, right? I don't think they will. Do you think people will get confused?
No. I think I've gone over this in my head already. This is something that it's going to be under Andrew Huffling's personal GitHub repository.
Right.
So that already removes any kind of ambiguity who's releasing this. He'll put a nice, message in the README like this is not the official release. This is a fork. Go back to DNN if you want to do your official release. And then at least it really makes it a lot easier for the rest of us in this world to work on this.
Okay. Sounds good. So yeah, it's all.
I still want to ask the question because I think if it's a completely separate build, let's say the effort for anybody to try it or for even to use it in a realistic project, of course, is enormous, and it feels like you should never use this as a live solution. Yeah. But if it were a plugin, it would feel like something you can start building on.
Yeah, but they shouldn't do that, Daniel. They shouldn't right now think that, oh, okay, this is going to be it, and that's it. We're not there yet.
This is extremely experimental. I mean, if you guys have time and you have intimate knowledge of how the MVC platform looks and you look at the fork code, we did some pretty nasty things in there to get this working. And, we might need to keep some of those nasty things in there, but we might not. And the code is very volatile right now. Like one of the things that I wasn't going to mention, but this is great for our discussion right now, is .NET Core Razor pages, the code behind inherits from page model, but the name is typically like index or whatever the name of your page is. I made a mistake in my fork, and I said, oh, it's all index model or whatever model. And then I realized, oh, model is not supposed to be on there. It's supposed to match the exact same name of the razor. So now I need to go up there and update that. And if someone's been trying to use it in any type of production environment, well, now that's a breaking change. So this is, I 100% agree with what Peter's saying here, that we need to put, I think it's great to put this out as a build and so people can play with it, but it needs to be very clear. This is 100% experimental. Yes, this is the direction we want to go in, but this is nowhere near ready for production.
Right.
We want those, power module builders to get their hands dirty and give us feedback. Oh, on post doesn't work. Let's do that. That's a great idea. Or I tried, doing this in Razor Pages and a platform doesn't support it. Let's,
Right.
that type of feedback will help drive it.
Basically, we're growing the team from, 3 or 4 people, trying to grow that to like 10, 15 people to look at this before we throw it out to like 100 people, right? What you were talking about, Daniel.
Yeah.
So, with baby steps, because I think there's a lot of problems there that need to be resolved, and they will start to emerge as we grow the team.
Okay, but could we still consider that even when we then go to the 100 or 200 people, that we would then
We'll see.
consider...
We'll see. I think it's way too early to say.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've made your point. Yes, it would be nice to get it as an extension, but frankly, I think it's I don't think it's fair to put a burden on the team to try to resolve that when we're already all so short on time, and trying to actually make this the most awesome module development pattern. I think we should be singularly focused on that.
It's really tough though, because the module pipeline in DNN is so tightly coupled to the .NET Nuke DLL. I'll take a look at it and see. I'm not going to spend hours, but I'll see if I can come up with any type of extension things. I mean, if anyone on this call or watching the video later has any ideas, please submit a pull request to my DNN platform Razor Pages branch, and let's do that, because that is a great idea. But I think it is something that we need to assess later. It's
Okay.
Feature parity and getting the Razor Pages features in now are more important, in my opinion.
Especially feature parity.
Yeah. One thing, Peter, you may like to know is Mitchell did some Redgate comparisons in between the current DNN database and the one that Iterative Framework is creating, and he said that it made some suggestions for, I think it said indexes or something, to make it more performant, and he said it was pretty good.
If you really want to excite our big friend Sebastian Leupold, you throw that out in the wild.
Yeah, well, I mean, so we got links, and we're going to post a video here of the meeting, so it's accessible here within, I don't know, an hour or so.
That's right. Yeah. All right.
All right, well, yeah.
So,
good job,
Andrew,
guys.
we're here to support you. We're here to support you whatever way we can. So definitely, yeah. So we'll make sure that the best.
All right. Well, then I'll leave it at this. If you want to help, shoot me a message. We got a channel that a couple of us are talking in the on Slack about this, or get a hold of me and I can let you know, or just submit a pull request on something.
Right. Okay. And let's make sure that at DNN Connect we can present something.
Well, I won't be there, but someone else could present to my place.
There are a few here that will be there.
Maybe next year.
Exactly. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, guys. I'm going to render and post a video and blog here shortly, and we will keep the discussion going. Nick, thanks for joining today. Always good to see you. And I guess we'll catch everybody on the next meeting.
And Daniel, thanks for your contribution.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Very, very helpful.
Yeah.
All right, see ya.
Thanks.